Good morning. Well, due to some technical difficulties, the recording that I made at church with with my partners sitting around a table did not record the audio, so I'm having to re-record this at home in order to send this information out. As we start a new series, sermon series of looking at the old in a new way, Pastor Don is going to be looking at Old Testament passages and finding how they relate to us, maybe in a new way than we've traditionally looked at them. This week, we look at the story of David and Goliath, a story that I don't know about the rest of you, but a story that I learned in Sunday school and vacation Bible school. And I wanted to explore that in some depth this morning. Now, the setting of this scene is the Philistine army and the Israelite army are on different sides of a valley. They're sort of at a stalemate. Each morning, Goliath, who's with the Philistines, comes out and he yells across the valley, demanding that they send someone out to fight with him. And the Israelites look over and they kind of wring their hands and woe is me, who can stand up to this giant? And then they go back to their tents and on about the way. And then the next day, the whole scene repeats itself. And it's been going on for some time. And then David comes on the scene, being sent by his father because his brothers are in the Israelite army. Now, before we go on and look at that part of the scene, I want to back up and look at the setting here and the history of how this came to be. The Philistines had been at odds with the Israelites from all time, from the very beginning when the Israelites came into the land of Canaan, the land that God had given to Abraham and his descendants. The Philistines occupied a part of the coast on the Mediterranean Sea, a very fertile part of the coast. It's in the area that we know as the Gaza Strip today, an area where the Palestinians have holed up, and you have this conflict from ages past that still continues to play out today from this same geographic area. The valley that they're there, I'd always pictured this as kind of a narrow valley, more of a ravine than an actual valley. But I found some pictures on the internet that indicate that it was a much wider valley than that. Maybe like a football field wide across there. So Goliath standing there and hollering, he would have to really yell in order to be heard across the way, across this valley. The Philistines were descended from the Canaanites, which were an Egyptian people. Given that this particular area being adjacent to Egypt across the Nile Delta there, that's not unusual. The Philistines, I think, have been sometimes lumped as to be an unusually large group of people, large of stature. And what I found was that wasn't necessarily so. But then you have Goliath, this mountain of a man. And it says that he was 7 feet 10 inches tall. Now, there's 7 feet 10 inches and then there's 7 feet 10 inches. And what I mean by this is that he was not just a tall, skinny man. Think the Incredible Hulk, if you remember the TV series. Goliath was 7 feet 10 inches of pure muscle. And he was also a mercenary. All this man had ever done in his life was to align himself with whoever was willing to pay him the most. He presently was living in Gath, Gath, which was one of the Philistine city-states. Now, there's a tradition or I guess you'd say it may be a myth, that has surrounded Goliath and a large group of a group of large statured individuals. Said that Goliath was descended from the Anakim, who were derived from the Nephilim, Nephilim. This is a mysterious, the Nephilim were a mysterious group of beings, people, and there were two traditions that surrounded these mysterious beings, both centered around being derived from fallen angels. On one tradition is that these angels had came to earth and been seduced by the beauty of the human women here on earth, and had had sexual relations with them and produced offspring, and as a result that they had been thrown out of heaven. The other tradition holds that they had been thrown out of heaven for other misdeeds and had come to earth and again been seduced by the beauty of the human women and produced offspring. And these offspring were a monstrous people compared to the people at that time. These are traditions. There is no history that supports any of this. Scripture makes only a passing reference to these people. So there's very mysterious there. But Goliath is attributed to be descended from these mysterious people. Now, also in the scripture, in the telling of the story that we find in the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel, that it depicts Saul as somewhat cowardly, that he would not go out there and fight Goliath. Well, from what I understand of Saul, he was more of a pragmatic person. In other words, he wasn't going to go and rattle the cage of Goliath because he knew that he was a fighting man. I mean, that's all the man had ever done was to fight. And that's how he made his living. And so Saul would be reluctant to go and fight this person because, I mean, that's, you might use the word suicide. It's inviting sure defeat, that you can't defeat this person on your own. And we'll come back to that on your own because that's an important part of this story here. But David comes on the scene. I mean, this is the background. And then David shows up, and he's there to bring food for his brothers, and he greets them. And he's there when Goliath makes his appearance on the far side of the valley and yells and says, "Send me somebody to fight." And David says, "Well, why won't anybody go over there and fight him? He's just a man." And everybody scoffs and, "Well, you don't understand, David. You're just a little boy. What can you do?" And David tells him that he's been tending his father's sheep, been out there all alone with his slingshot and his rod, and that he's killed bears, he's killed mountain lions, defending his father's sheep. So, what's even a large man, what's that? Somebody ought to take care of him. And again, they say, "No, you can't do that." And so David says, "Well, I'll do it." And he even yells across that, "Hey, I'm coming out, sort of high noon. I'll see you down there on the valley at noon the next day, high noon, and we'll have it out." And the Philistine Goliath is sort of incredulous, like, "You're just a little guy. Isn't there anybody over there that really wants to fight me? You insult me to come out here like this." Is the way that he responds. And Saul tries to dissuade him, but then he says, "Well, if you're going to fight, here, take my armor." And he has his armor placed on David. Here again, Saul is an adult, a very tall adult. And here's David, who's always been depicted as a man not of great stature of height, who just a teenager, who's come there and is willing to go out, and they put the armor on him, and he can't move. The armor at that time would have been maybe chainmail, a vest, the intricate weaving of wire together to form a protection across his body, a helmet, his spear. David takes all that off and puts it aside, and he says, well, I'll do it my way. He says, I got my slingshot, I got my rod, and also I have God on my side. Remember I said, who can do this on their own? Well, David realizes, as he's realized all along, that he's always had God on his side, there with him. And so he goes out there and he confronts Goliath. Says he took 5 stones. Whether he used all 5 of them or whether only one, the scripture only says that one found its mark right here, right between the eyes, and Goliath goes down for the count. Now, the way I remember this story being told and the way I learned it in Sunday school is that David had killed Goliath with his slingshot. But Scripture doesn't say that. Scripture only says that Goliath had been knocked down. And then it goes on to say that the very first thing that he did after that is that he took Goliath's sword. You'll have to excuse the lawnmower outside right now. But he took Goliath's sword and cut his head off. Well, he first stabbed him to kill him and then cut his head off. So David wasn't taking any chances that this giant was going to get up and come after him. He knocked him down, knocked him out, maybe killed him, we don't know. But David is making sure that he does, in fact, put him out of his misery, so to speak, and takes his head back to Saul. Now, I said that David understood that he was not by himself. One of the things that David says in this passage of Scripture, I believe it's in the 18th verse or thereabouts. No, it's not there. I don't see that real quickly there. But he says in there, and the battle is the Lord's. Now, this is something that's been near and dear to my heart. I have a little brass plaque that's here in this desk drawer someplace. It resurfaces every now and then when I need to be reminded that I'm not alone in whatever it is that I'm involved with. A friend gave this plaque to me about 30 years ago now. It was around 1992, 3, somewhere around in there, that she gave this to me, and I've kept it, and I always remember that the battle is the Lord's, that our part is to be faithful and to be present and to be available to God, that it is God who does the battle. There is a graphic that I found as I was looking here, and it shows a man walking, his shadow on the wall, the sun reflecting on the wall, and then right behind him is the shadow of a smaller person holding a sling, and then over on the other side is this giant, this shadow that dwarfs the shadow of the man. And I just thought how appropriate it is that there are giants in this world that we deal with all the time. And we may wring our hands and say, oh, woe is me, how can I do this? Truth is, we can't do it on our own. It is only with God that we're able to do this. So I'm not sure if that's where Pastor Dawn is going with this. I don't know. But we'll see a little bit later this morning as Pastor Dawn unpacks this with her sermon. I apologize that we had to do this again, and that you didn't have the benefit of my partners at the table. Um, I don't know what the problem was. All I know is that when I went to post it online, that um, the audio wasn't there. So we'll see you next week when we again look at the passage of Scripture. We'll be looking at the story of Esther, one of the books of the Bible that almost didn't get into the Bible, and I'll talk about that next week. But hope to see you in worship, and may God's blessings be upon you.